Hmm, look what you made me do. I'm subscribed to the Wall Street Journal now. Damn it, I need a drink. Fortunately, I'm well supplied. Ready for the apocalypse. Ready to purge any germs, any viruses that may be hiding within this germ hole here. And purge them. Purifying fire of alcohol. Cheers. Yes, old number 7. Yeah, so I actually recently opened an investing account, and I have $0 in the investing account because I'm waiting for my damn tax return to come, but it's on the way. I spoke to my accountant, so yes, very good. So maybe it is good that I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. But the reason I just did that here was I'm trying to find out what exactly is going on with California. And I feel that from an economic standpoint and from a thoroughness standpoint, because usually people interested in the economy and in making money are thorough with looking at data, I thought I'd go ahead and say, hey, Wall Street Journal won't let me read anymore, I'll subscribe. Tricky bit is I thought it said it was going to be $1, but it's going to be $1 for a few months, and it's going to be $19 every month. Sneaky, but hey, I like the article that I'm reading here. So let me give you what it's basically saying, which you probably already heard from other news outlets, but it's all new to me, as I first found out about this in the early morning when my supervisor at the end of my shift came up to me, and I was half dead because I work at UPS and we're overwhelmed by volume because we're a delivery company. We're in the business of delivering, and my trucks, I think I've said in several videos by now, deliver to hospitals and large like veterinarians and all sorts of places like that. So they're chock full of shit of all stripes, including medicine. I mean, hell, UPS found out earlier in the year delivers, or not earlier in the year, maybe earlier last year, delivers organs, which is creepy. You do not? I have a whole article on that on my website that I'll probably link to down below. But yeah, let's get to the California situation. Let me stop babbling here for a bit. So what actually happened in California is there was a lockdown, and here it is. I begin reading now. California ordered its 40 million residents to stay at home, except for essential activities, beginning Thursday night in the largest such lockdown in the US, as the nation's total coronavirus cases rose to more than 14,000, and an intensifying outbreak in Europe pushed State Department officials to advise citizens not to travel abroad, as if you needed the advisory. But I suppose some people do. In a letter to President Trump, California Governor Gavin Newsom said he estimated 56% of the state's population, or 22.5 million people, would be infected over an 8-week period. Yikes, it's quite dire. I need another drink. Die, germs, die. Okay, now, obviously, this is a very conservative estimate. I've probably arrived at this by talking to physicians, and it's based on the number of cases that have already developed, and he's looking at the worst case scenario because he's trying to cover his ass, and I do not blame him. But as I said, I still think that a lot of things are just blown out of proportion. California is very different from the rest of the country from what I've come to understand. They have a lot of problems in Los Angeles with tent cities. They have all sorts of roaming populations. A lot of hippies go there and hang out. Forget exactly what. There's a certain lifestyle that it's called, but yeah, California has a lot of problems and a very large population. So I'm not surprised that they are the first state to begin to take draconian measures. And then again, it's California, so draconian measures in a state which is very government-loving is not unheard of. But the entire country is going crazy. There's several states that have been discussed here. like Mississippi and I think Pennsylvania or something of that nature that are shutting stuff down. My state is shutting down restaurants. And as far as I know, hell, restaurants must be, just from my general observation, a big chunk of our economy because there's not very much industry. There's a handful of farms that are corporate, maybe a few mom and pop farms, but it's an agricultural area, never been very heavily industrialized, and America is no longer heavily industrialized because it's all in China, and we're finding out why that's a problem. I've been ranting on this since in my teens, maybe not teens, but very early 20s. I was starting to note, what the hell is going on in this country, because that's when I was trying to get employment. And yeah, so there is in fact this crazy lockdown. Let's see if we can gather a bit more information here. Mr. Newsom sent the letter, and that's that letter to President Trump, where he made the dire prediction, asking that a naval hospital ship be deployed to Los Angeles to increase healthcare capacity before the lockdown order. In calling for people to stay home, Mr. Newsom asked the state's residents to bend the curve together. Now, I've heard that in several ways. I've heard it as bend the curve and flatten the curve. Nearly half of residents in America's most populous state had already been given stay-at-home orders from local cities and counties, including Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area. Not surprising, because those are very, very large cities, and as they said, the most populous state. Does not mean that we should extrapolate this reaction to the rest of the country, but hey. As the center of the virus continues to shift to the west, the death toll in Italy surpassed that of China, where the outbreak originated in December. And here's my theory on that. Again, Italy has, I think, Europe's and perhaps the world's oldest population. Their median age is 47. In the United States, it's about 37, I think. So it's like a decade older, the median age. And yeah, they don't have the same level of government and responsiveness in place as China does, because China is the very definition of draconian. So aging population plus slow response time due to it not being a hellhole, yeah, it causes a little bit of havoc. But hey, that's just part of nature. If you have an old population, it's going to be susceptible when something like this happens. And we should try. My only relative in the country is 80 years old, very sensitive to other issues. But, I can observe measures to keep him safe. That doesn't mean that the country needs to shut down. Restaurants, I don't understand why, if other businesses are open, especially since I'm still going to work in a dirty warehouse, loading packages from all over the world onto these trucks that go out all over South Carolina, the area of South Carolina I'm in. So, yeah. Fatalities in Italy reached 3,405 Thursday, compared with 3,251 in mainland China, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. China reported no new domestic coronavirus infections for the first time since the outbreak surfaced, if they are to be believed. And this is a very lengthy article, and maybe I'll go through the whole thing tomorrow or sometime in the near future. Maybe I won't, but let me do a topic shift, if I may. Let's contextualize this to the grander scheme of history, and also talk about, there's comparisons to the Spanish flu and things of that nature. At that time, trench warfare was going on, and at that time, medicine was not what it is now, and sanitation was not what it is now, and the ability to deploy supplies is not what it is now. And so, thinking that something as terrible as that is going to happen given the resources and advances that we have is definitely, in my opinion, hype. Now, for me, I'm going to try to bring some comfort by sharing something somewhat personal. So I was adopted when I was about 14 years old, but I came to the country, the United States, when I was 8 and knocked about for a bit, being taken care of by my grandmother, and then she married a man, and they adopted me as a son. And his family is Scottish, and they came over, I think, around the Victorian time, around the early 1900s, and so we have all of these old photos of them from that time. I had a very, quintessential photograph of a person wearing a top hat, but here's sort of the idea of that time. You see how old that is, but at the same time, if you think about it, 1900 was only exactly 120 years ago, right? Okay. And yes, that looks nothing like me, because again, it's not a blood relation. But that's not as important as sort of the cultural ambiance, a sort of Victorian mindset I was able to gather from being around all this furniture and all of these photographs and books that were knocking about. So this is my grandfather's father's book on carpentry. It's from the 50s. So he says R. Weir in there. And it's just all this very neat, very basic stuff. How to fix the roof, which I'm going to have to do. Joists and things. And the world has been through so much in just that brief 120 years. 2 world wars. That Spanish flu thing people were talking about. SARS, MERS, etc. And really, in terms of that, this is just a drop in the bucket. So what we need a little bit of is this book was written in 1899 by J.R. Miller, who is, I believe, a Scottish-American or perhaps Scottish Presbyterian theologian. My grandmother attended a Presbyterian seminary at Erskine, which is here in South Carolina, in a small town called US. So she has a lot of these books knocking about, and these are sort of, I suppose you can say, homilies. And this is about, being both gentle and strong. And this is exactly what we need in this time. Again, this is the Victorian era ethos affecting me through various channels I've just shared. And I'm trying to put it forward as a sort of strength, as a sort of kind of comforting call to vigor, as it were. Now, we want to be sensitive to the needs of people and to keeping people safe, but we do not want to lose our heads so much that we knock down the economy and are thus handicapped in so doing. We're going to really need to, as we're dealing with the government and what it's forcing us to do, learn to come together and cooperate, because we want to be in close quarters, and we need to learn to carry each other's burdens and wait. Hopefully this will resolve far quicker than my worst fears, but you never know. You never know. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. I was hoping to make, more insightful, more erudite, more cutting statements, but even though I took a nap earlier, my brain is still slightly foggy, and that's what I have right now. So let's just step away from this whole thing, and let's move to some very lovely books and random topics. So here I have Joseph Ledoux' The Synaptic Self, which is about neuroscience. He is a neuroscientist like Antonio Damasio that popularizes the subject and makes it accessible through his excellent books. An Introduction to the Philosophy of Law, and then Friedrich Nietzsche, Twilight of the Idols and the Antichrist. And these are just random books that I picked up off the shelf to look at. I can actually sort of relate them. They're all philosophical in nature, even though some of them are scientific, some of them are specifically philosophical for the discipline of law, and some of them are exploratory in the grand scale, in the grand scheme, in the cosmological and ethical sense, like Friedrich Nietzsche's The Twilight of the Idols. And there's certainly a lot of idols that have to be smashed in terms of our perceptions of how we function as we find out more about neuroscience. But then neuroscience itself becomes its own idol, so we're constantly overcoming things because we are this crazy superorganism, humanity, that learns things through this collective mind that, iterates its way throughout history, and old truths are either knocked aside or reinforced or recontextualized, and it's all very, very excellent. And so when you're smashing all these idols and things, you have to the practice of law, of governing ourselves, has to change. How we relate, how we punish, how we try to control, how we try to facilitate the processes of trade and of life, so that we're not living in an anarchic, everyone for himself world. And that's actually very timely now in this crisis, which, it is natural, but it's also man-made, in that the panic that arises from it is probably going to be, in my opinion, worse than the disease. But we're going to need to be able to robustly use the combination of disciplines to pursue legal action and develop legal frameworks for dealing with this, and also to hang on to old legal frameworks that will prevent people in power, through an overzealous desire to protect, from setting precedents that can be used by parties that would wish to, rule us entirely, basically do away with what the United States was intended to be as an enlightened era birthed democratic republic. So, gonna be maybe going through some of this stuff, again getting back to the Bertrand Russell that I've been reading. But thanks so much for listening. I hope you've gotten something out of it. My main website is fractaljournal.com, where you'll find stories, ideas, and more. These videos, the Fractal Standard videos, are supposed to be daily, but past couple of days have been kind of iffy just because of my workload and trying to, set up everything to take care of my elderly relative and myself for the next couple of months here. And if you've got older relatives or anybody in your life, or even yourself, I am saying this is overhyped, but as I said, the reaction of people is going to make things difficult, perhaps more difficult than I could possibly imagine or predict. So I'm sure that most people have already begun to prepare, but continue to prepare and continue to psychologically prepare yourselves. Anyway, all this being said, thanks so much and take care.